At Dubai Creek Harbour, there is a slab of concrete wider than a football pitch, but nothing stands on it. Under the slab sit 145 piles. Each is driven 236 feet down. The workers who placed them finished in 2018. Emaar Properties put the bill for the tower above at about $1 billion. The tower has not been built. Salt air moves across the water all day. Dust settles on the fence. A security guard walks the viewing deck on the far bank every evening, and tourists photograph the gap in the skyline where the tallest building in the world was meant to stand. At first, this might just seem like a delay. Big towers slip. The Burj Khalifa opened months late, but the base was finished 8 years ago. Emaar has redrawn the design, announced a restart, and pushed the building contract back again in June 2026. Around that quiet hole, homes have been sold for a district planned to hold more than 200,000 residents. Stand at the fence in August, and the heat comes up off the ground into your legs. You can hear the chillers running in the finished towers behind you. On the tower side, there is no sound at all. To understand what is happening at Dubai Creek Harbour, you have to stop looking at the tower and look at the paperwork. Start with a number that does not exist. Emaar has never published an official height for Dubai Creek Tower. Not in April 2016, when the Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava unveiled the design at a launch event in Dubai. Not at the groundbreaking 6 months later. Not in March 2024, when Emaar said the job had restarted with a revised drawing. Project trackers put the original design a little above 4,200 feet. The Burj Khalifa, the tallest building anyone has actually finished, stands at 2,717 feet. Emaar has confirmed only that the new tower will be taller than the Burj Khalifa. One sentence is the whole public claim. Every other super-tall building on Earth arrives with a number attached to it. The Jeddah Tower in Saudi Arabia is quoted at 3,281 feet. The Merdeka Tower in Kuala Lumpur is quoted at 2,227 feet. A published height is not a piece of trivia for the record books, and it is not marketing. A height is the figure that the wind engineers, the lenders, the insurers, and the lift makers all price their work from. So here is the question. Why would a developer of this size hold a number back for 10 years? The answer is not secrecy on Emaar's part, and it is not modesty. The answer is that the number is still moving. A building height in Dubai is an output, not an ambition. The final figure falls out of the wind study, the lift plan, the concrete mix, and the money. Every input on that list has moved since 2016. Emaar is not hiding a height. Emaar does not yet have a height it is willing to sign its name to. Now the piles. A barrette pile is a rectangular shaft of concrete cast straight into the ground, and it behaves like a very deep, very thin wall rather than a round post. Emaar sank 145 of them under Dubai Creek Tower. Each reaches roughly 236 feet below the surface, which is deeper than most office towers are tall. Down at that level, the ground under Dubai Creek is not rock. The layers are weak sandstone and cemented sand, and salt water moves through them all year. The piles do two separate jobs. The first job is to carry the weight of the tower down to stiffer ground far below the surface. The second job is to stop the whole base from tipping when wind pushes sideways on a building that tall. Here is the part that surprises people who have never worked on a site. The foundation is the cheapest and the most certain piece of any super-tall building. The pour at Dubai Creek Harbour came to roughly 50,000 cubic meters of concrete. The steel inside it came to about 12,000 tons. The base under the Burj Khalifa uses a very similar arrangement, and the Burj Khalifa has held since 2010 without drama. This channel takes apart big projects, piece by piece. Subscribe to PT-Team. The expensive part comes next. A piling crew can finish a foundation in a single season. Nobody has to invent anything to do it. The soil report is already written, the rig is already on site, and the concrete arrives by truck through the night, when the air is cool enough for a good pour. Batching plants in Dubai run in the dark all summer for exactly that reason. The men on the slab work in helmets and long sleeves at 2 in the morning, and the whole job is boring in the way that good engineering usually is. What sits above the slab is the hard part: the lifts, the water pumps, the wind damping, the glass. All of those systems must be ordered by Emaar years before anything at Dubai Creek Harbour opens its doors. And the money, which has to be raised in stages across most of a decade, while the price of everything moves underneath you. The upper half of the job is where tall towers actually die. Hold on to this, because the rest of the story runs on it. A finished foundation is not proof that a tower is coming. A finished foundation is proof that somebody was willing to pay for the easy part first. Back to April 2016. The design the architect Santiago Calatrava presented borrowed its shape from a minaret and from the bud of a lily. A public observation deck sat at the crown instead of offices. The cost was put at about $1 billion. Emaar has never revised that figure in public since. Think about what has happened to construction prices in the years since that number was published. It was quoted before the cement and steel price moves of 2021, before the redesign, and before a single line of the main tender was written. Treat it as a 2016 number, because that is exactly what it is, and the gap between that number and today is part of why the tower is still a hole. In October 2016, the ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, laid the first stone at Dubai Creek Harbour. Piling began. By May 2018, the raft and the piles were finished. Then the site went quiet. The usual account is that the pandemic stopped the work in 2020. The pandemic account is true, and it is not the whole story. The base had already been complete for 22 months before the first lockdown, and no superstructure had risen in that window. Whatever paused Dubai Creek Tower, it started before anyone had heard the word COVID. Set the tower aside for a moment, because there is a second building here that almost nobody talks about. Not the tower, the district. Dubai Creek Harbour covers about 6 square kilometers of waterfront on the old creek, upstream from the airport and away from the beach side of the city. Emaar and Dubai Holding planned it for more than 200,000 residents. Counting offices and hotels and shops, the working population was put at 450,000. Now the scale of that. A district for 200,000 people is a mid-sized city dropped onto a bend in a creek. In 2022, Emaar bought out its partner's share of the district for about 8 billion dirhams. Homes there have been selling since 2016, and many of them are finished. Creek Beach is built and occupied. Creek Island is built. The viewing point is built, and the guard who locks its gate at night is looking straight across dark water at empty ground. Walk the promenade at Dubai Creek Harbour on a Friday evening and the district looks finished. Families come down to the water after the heat drops. A man sells coffee from a cart near the steps. Cyclists use the concrete path that runs along the creek toward the old bird sanctuary. Every part of that picture is real, and Emaar built all of it to the standard the residents were shown. The only missing piece at Dubai Creek Harbour is the reason most of those buyers chose this address instead of a dozen others in Dubai. Remember what the brochures were actually selling. They were not selling a pleasant waterfront district with a metro station coming. They were selling the address of the next tallest building in the world. Buyers paid a premium for a view of something that existed only as a drawing. Here is the money line, and it is the one most people notice last. Emaar was not selling apartments in order to fund the tower. Emaar was selling the tower in order to price the apartments. Selling a district on a landmark is not a crime, and it is not even unusual. Master-planned districts everywhere are sold on a landmark that comes later, from Canary Wharf to Hudson Yards. But it does change who is carrying the risk, and the answer is not the party that drew the tower. Now the payment schedule, because this is where an abstract argument turns into a bank transfer. In Dubai, most new homes are sold off-plan, and the buyer pays in installments tied to the construction progress of their own building. The money goes into an escrow account, watched by the Dubai Land Department. Regulators put the escrow rules in place after 2008, when thousands of buyers lost deposits on towers that never came out of the ground. The escrow system works. The escrow system also has a blind spot that nobody designed on purpose. Escrow protects the specific building you bought a home in. Nothing in the escrow rules is tied to the landmark that made you choose that neighborhood in the first place. So a family in Creek Beach pays every installment on time. They get handed a finished apartment with a working kitchen and a balcony. They start paying an annual service charge to the Owners Association, and they look out at a slab. Every part of that sequence is legal, every part of it was disclosed in the contract, and the buyer still owns a view that has not arrived. Ask what the missing tower costs that family, and the honest answer is that nobody can price it exactly. A service charge in a district like Dubai Creek Harbour is billed on built area every year, and it arrives whether the landmark does or not. Resale listings along the creek still carry the phrase "Creek Tower Views." Agents keep using the phrase because buyers still respond to it, 10 years after the groundbreaking and 8 years after the last concrete went into the raft. There is a second group of people with no contract at all. A shop owner signed a 10-year lease on a unit near the promenade because of the footfall a landmark would bring. A boat operator bought a second launch to run trips up the creek. A taxi driver took on a loan against the visitor numbers a record-breaking tower was supposed to pull in. None of them were promised anything by anybody. All of them planned around the drawing, because that is what a master plan invites you to do. Which brings us to the contract that has never been signed. In August 2023, Mohammed Alabar, the developer who founded Emaar, said construction would begin within a year. In March 2024, the company said the project had restarted with a revised design. No crew arrived on the slab that month. In January 2026, Emaar said the main construction tender would be launched within a quarter. In June 2026, the tender was delayed again, and Emaar pointed to steel and cable prices and to global supply chain conditions. The antagonist of this story does not have a face. The antagonist is a tender that has not been awarded. No contractor has a crew on that ground. No engineer has a drawing stamped for construction on it either. Until a main contractor is appointed with a price, a program and a penalty clause, everything else is a press release. The difference between the two is not a matter of tone. An announcement costs a morning of somebody's time. A signed contract costs real money on the day of signature, and it puts a completion date inside a document a court can enforce. Watch what does get built at Dubai Creek Harbour while the tower waits. The Roads and Transport Authority is driving the Blue Line Metro out toward the district, and a station model was shown publicly in January 2026. Emaar keeps launching new residential towers along the same stretch of water. Cranes turn over the creek most days. None of them turn over the slab. What does a finished foundation cost to keep? Less than you would guess, and a great deal more than nothing. Start with the steel. Concrete gains strength for years and then simply sits there. The steel inside it is the part that needs watching. Down at 236 feet, the groundwater around Dubai Creek carries chloride, which is the salt that attacks reinforcing steel inside concrete from the inside out. Piles in the Gulf are cast with that in mind, using dense mixes and thick cover over the bars. The steel that pokes up out of the top of the raft, waiting for columns that were never built, is the exposed part. A site engineer walks that slab on a schedule and writes the same report every quarter. There is pumping to keep the base dry. A guard patrols the fence line around the raft. A technician tests the exposed steel bars, and a lab in Dubai writes up the results. None of it makes a headline. All of it is a bill with no revenue standing against it. And every year that passes, the design on the shelf gets older. Building codes move. Lift technology moves. Fire strategy for supertall towers has changed since 2016, and evacuation lift rules have changed with it. A tower drawn in one decade and built in the next is not the same tower, and the redrawing costs money before a single crane arrives. There are 4 ways this ends at Dubai Creek Harbour, and each of them takes something from somebody. The first way is that Emaar signs the contract and builds the 2024 design. That path costs the most cash up front and takes most of a decade to deliver. Every buyer at Creek Beach is waiting for it. The second way is a shorter tower, cheaper, faster, easier to finance. And a shorter tower quietly retires the claim that sold the whole district. The people who paid extra for a view of the tallest building in the world would get a building instead. The third way is a long hold. The slab sits. the district fills in around it, and the tower becomes a permanent maybe on the master plan. A long hold costs Emaar the least money today. It costs the buyers the most, over 20 years, because a view of a fenced site does not appreciate. The fourth way is that Emaar puts something else on the base. A shorter mixed-use block on the same piles is possible if the loads work out, and engineers do this more often than the public realizes. It would also be a public admission, and admissions are expensive for a company listed on a stock exchange. How far does the evidence actually go? 3 steps, and it is worth being exact about where it stops. Step 1 is that holding the site costs money and produces none. Nobody disputes that. Step 2 is that Dubai Creek Harbour was priced on the promise of the tower. The marketing, the naming, and the master plan all support that reading, but it is a judgment rather than a document. Step 3 is that the value of the district depends on a decision the residents do not control, which is Emaar's willingness to spend. Step 3 is where the chain runs out, and the limit matters. There is no evidence that Emaar cannot build Dubai Creek Tower. The company is profitable, and its balance sheet is strong. The fair reading is that the tower has not yet been worth building, and nobody outside the company can see the number that would change that. So anyone who tells you this project is dead is guessing. Anyone who gives you a completion date is guessing too. Remember the slab. Chicago has stood exactly where Dubai Creek Harbour is standing now. In 2007, the same architect, Santiago Calatrava, designed a twisting tower for the lakefront called the Chicago Spire. Crews dug the foundation and lined a circular shaft in the ground. Then the money disappeared in 2008 and the work stopped. The hole sat at the end of Lakeshore Drive for 16 years. Joggers ran past the fence every morning on their way along the lake. A developer called Related Midwest bought the site in 2014 and redrew the plan more than once. The shaft was finally filled in during 2024. A pair of shorter towers by the firms Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill is now rising on the ground where the spire was supposed to stand, and neither of them will be the tallest anything. The pattern is old, and it does not belong to Dubai. Foundations get built during the confident years, because a foundation is quick and visible and comparatively cheap. The tower on top gets built during the years that follow, and those years arrive with their own weather. The gap in the Dubai skyline is not really a story about a city that overreached. It is a story about the order in which large things get paid for, and about what happens to everyone who bought in before the second payment came due. Somebody will lock the gate at the viewing point again tonight. The lights of the finished towers will come on behind that guard, and the ground across the water will stay dark. There are 145 piles under it, holding up nothing at all, and they will still be down there in 30 years whichever way this goes. This video reviews public statements, filings, and project records, and it is not an inspection or a prediction about any specific building. Full sources and dates are in the pinned comment. Here is the question worth arguing about. When a landmark sells a neighborhood and then does not arrive, who should carry that cost? Say it in the comments, and subscribe to PT-Team if you want the next one.